I just watched Chris's very excellent Introduction to Validations tutorial, and this code here is exactly as he leaves the code at the end of that tutorial. It works exactly as his code worked. I'll show you that in just a moment, but I wanted to make some changes to the code that I thought might be instructive. Um, so I'm going to dive in on that, and the first thing I'm going to do is just make another branch because we may be using this code in future tutorials, and uh, yeah, I want to keep it as it is. So git checkout dash b validation opinion. I'm on a new and exciting branch. I'm going to go Python main, get this cooking, and just to show you that this is doing what we expect, this says success. That's great. Reload the page. If I say dot and I say 88 and I attempt to validate these things, I get the appropriate error messages. So you see, the code is working. That's all I'm after there. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to have a look first at our post route, and the first thing that made my fingers twitch a little bit were these lines, line 74 and line 83 in my code, and these lines work perfectly as they are. Um, in many languages, this will do exactly what we expect it to do, but if we're writing Python, we can say if hours not in range 24. Remember that range will default as a starting place to 0, so 0 through up to but not including 24 will offer this same range there. So that should do the same job. This if minutes not in range 60 and comment there, save. Oop, I have angered the machine. Both of these need their colons, save, restart my server, and again, I should be able to show you that 23 and 59, this works just fine. And then if I refresh and I say 99 and hey, we get the appropriate error messages. We're out of range. Okay, so that's great. Now on to something a little more interesting. Chris provided us a pattern. The pattern represented in the is integer function is simply this. He took a bit of the validation, he extracted it into its own function, and he used it. There's no real reason why this logic couldn't be in this function other than it crowds the function, it obscures what the function's job really is. So we can extract that logic, we can put it somewhere else, in this case, right up here, and it clarifies things for us. So this function is kind of huge, and it has too much responsibility. I want to clean it out in the same way, following the same pattern that is integer does. So following that same pattern, I can say def validate hours, and I can hand it hours. And what is it going to do? Well, really what I want it to do is I want it to do all of this, right? So if I grab this and I set this up here, Gimme, gimme. Boom, boom. And what am I going to do? I need to handle something like that and something like this, but up here. So if I say hours and hours error is equal to hours, that's the hours being passed in as a parameter, and the empty string, then this will walk through the same logic, and what we want back from this, what this should return is the hours and the hours error. Now, down here, what do I want from this? I want hours error to equal validate hours, this new fancy function. And what are we passing in? We're passing request dot form hours. So just like that, we've taken all of this decision making, we've placed it up here into its own function, and now we're calling that function right here. So this should still, with the exception of the anger that I've created on line 65. So let's back that up one round. All right. Come up here, we resend, looking good so far. To validate, that works as expected. What about, hey, and the number 99, we get, again, exactly the error message we expect. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do this same thing with the function def validate minutes, and we're going to pass it minutes in some form or another, and just like before, this is all of the responsibility that we want it taking care of. So add this. Again, using this same pattern, we have minutes that are going to come in here, and we have minutes errors. So minutes and minutes errors, and that will equal minutes. Oh, brain freeze. Minutes and minutes. Nope. And this. Remember, this minutes is the argument that it's receiving, and then the return value, after it walks through the same logic that we already verified and validated below, after that we want it to return minutes and minutes error. So let's head that mess up off at the pass. Then we come down here, and we don't need this anymore. We don't need this anymore. What we need is minutes error to equal validate minutes. And I see that I misspelled that there, which means I almost certainly misspelled it up here. And that, again, is using the request object form minutes. So from there, we should have the exact same functionality. And once again, I'm going to say 1, I'm going to say 2, this should work just fine, and it does. Hooray. And then if I say good and -1, we should get not a valid integer and out of range. So that is pretty exciting to me. I'm going to get rid of all of this. I'm going to get rid of all of this. And this is the current state of our function. Validate time calls validate hours, calls validate minutes. It gets all the necessary parameters set up there. And then all it does with that information is it says, if there aren't any errors, return success. If there are any errors, re-render with those errors. It's the function has a very clean responsibility. It's readable, and that's great. As a programmer, you're going to read code a lot. Code you wrote, code somebody else has written, and you're going to stare at it and think, what the hell does this do? And this is pretty straightforward. What does it do? It checks for errors, and if they're not there, hooray! And if they are there, re-render. The other piece that I wanted to touch is both of these two methods. Let's move this closer. Command X. Boom, boom, boom. Let's move this down next to so both of these decorators respond to the same route. And in my experience, while this is an option, the limited experience that I have, when I handed something like this in to somebody for review, they handed this back to me and said, why? Why do we need two routes? And I didn't have a particularly good reason for that. So what we might do instead is we might have one route, and we might say that this route responds to both get and posts. And it makes a decision. When this method is triggered, it says if request.method is equal to get. If the verb, the HTTP verb used when this method was hit was get, then, well, I'm going to do this. And then if we're going to be, we can be more explicit than possibly necessary, and we can say if, or then, words, request.method equals post, then do these things. And then at this point, we shouldn't need that. This should handle both gets and posts and decide based on the verb what action to take. And let's see here. So far, so good. To validate, hooray, success. So this is our get. This is get all day long. Then when we attempt to post, out of range. Not a valid integer. Both of these out of range. So from there, the last thing that I would probably do is I would take all of these helpers that we've made. These are the two we just made. These are the ones that, or this is the one that Chris made for us. I'm going to grab that. I'm going to take them all the way up topside, just under our constant strings, and just group them together. So we start out with these helper methods that we've made, and then we get into the actual the business logic of the web application. And this is now our form validation. Take it with a grain of salt. This is an opinion. And yeah, suddenly I'm tired of talking.